Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. It looks like it's time to get started here. So we'll go ahead and kick things off. So just to start, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests and valued participants, welcome to the Damage Prevention Trends and Innovations 2024 webinar, proudly hosted by the Point Man team. I'm your host, Marvin Lopez, and I'm thrilled to be here guiding you through this insightful session today. In the ever-evolving landscape of damage prevention, it's crucial for professionals and industry enthusiasts to stay up to date on the latest trends and innovations. Today, we have assembled an exceptional panel of experts to delve into the forefront of this dynamic field. Before we dive into the meat of our discussions, let's take a moment to introduce our esteemed speakers. First up, we have Brenda Reigle, a seasoned professional with a wealth of experience in damage prevention. Following Brenda, we'll hear from Steve Slusarenko, bringing his expertise to the table. And then from the Point Man team, we'll be here to kind of just support Randall Harper, Garrett Kohler, Peter Schreier. We'll be here to share insightful experiences in the industry. So without further ado, I'd like to begin by introducing or giving a moment for Brenda and Steve to introduce themselves. Brenda, floor is all yours.
All right, thanks. There should be a little bit of a bio there somewhere, but basically to give you a really short scenario, I have 12 years experience at the Pennsylvania House and Senate, so I have a lot of legislative background. And from there, when my senator left and went back to Pittsburgh for another political position, I took a position as the executive director of the Pennsylvania Utility Contractors Association, of which I was with the association for 26 years until I retired in October of 2022. And now I've started my own company called Dig Prevention Consulting. I'm still out there trying to advance the industry in various ways and helping the contractors so their voice is still heard.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brenda. And Steve, if you don't mind.
Sure. Steve Slusarenko. I live in Greater Vancouver. I spent 18 years with an oil and gas company, West Coast Transmission, back in the day, now called Enbridge. Worked for them as a project manager. The last 10 years I was there, building gas plants and meter stations and working on pipeline projects. And also got into the software side of things, and that's how I got connected with Point Man originally. So I was one of the, ProStar. I was one of the ProStar managers, if you will, or executive early on. Retired from ProStar about 4 or 5 years ago now. And since then, I've been working on the SUMDEx project, which is a Subsurface Utility Mapping data exchange. And this idea came up when I was talking to JD Maniscalco at Colorado One Call about an article that Jim Osbach wrote, where they were looking for the state DOTs to be the custodians of center line information for assets in their rights of way. And JD raised an issue, said my members won't want to share their data with anybody, and they don't want to have a separate database. So I started thinking about it, and that's where I came up with the thought about, how can we support damage prevention needs using the one calls. And that's when I came across a newer project in the UK, but they were creating a separate database. I said that won't fly here in North America, so how do we do this in North America? And we'll talk about that as we get into SUMDEx, about how we approached it and how well it's being received now.
Wonderful. Well, Steve, thank you. Looking forward to talking about that with you guys. Randall, Randall, Peter, if you guys just don't mind giving a quick introduction to yourselves also.
So I'll go ahead first. I'll turn the video on here. It's all right. Good afternoon or good morning, depends where you are, everybody. Name's Peter Schreier. I am the chief scientist at ProStar. My focus and function is really to advance the industry through, taking a look at the Point Man software and our solution and figuring out ways of, integrating that within industry. I've been working in the geomatics world for about 20 odd years. I'm a geomatics engineer and a land surveyor, so I lend my expertise to further that goal. Randall?
Okay. So I'm Randall Harper, solution specialist. I typically deal with workflow and technical support regarding Point Man and your hardware. I also handle onboarding and training with respect to Point Man and new clients. So I have like, I guess, a really strong foundation in understanding what it takes to implement changes within an organization to start something new. So yeah, that's me. Thank you.
Thank you, Randall. Thank you, Peter. And I'd like to give a special shout out to also Gary Kohler, who's on here. This webinar wouldn't be possible without him. He works for Point Man Marketing. But thank you
for
all.
the annoying invitations. So if you guys have any topics for the future that you want to suggest, reach out to me. And any kind of presenting opportunities you'd be interested in. So, thanks.
Yeah. Thank you all for sharing a glimpse of your expertise and experiences. As for me, my name is Marvin Lopez. I'm the Director of Client Success here at ProStar. We are indeed privileged to have such a distinguished panel with us today. So lastly, we'd like to overview what the agenda will be for today's webinar. We will start by exploring the current trends, damage prevention, followed by in-depth discussions on some of the latest innovations shaping the industry. Our speakers will share valuable insights, case studies, and practical strategies to help you navigate the challenges and opportunities in this dynamic field. So buckle up for an engaging and enlightening conversation as we begin to unravel damage prevention trends and innovations for 2024. So without further delay, let's get started. Garrett, if you don't mind. So why talk damage prevention? Well, according to the 2019 DIRT report, there's about 500,000 is the number of strikes that happen each and every year. That has surely gone up, especially after this new $1 trillion infrastructure bill has gone through and some of these projects are coming to life. There's an estimated $10 billion of local underground infrastructure projects prior to construction. And then there's still about a $30 billion annual estimated impact of underground damages to the economy. So obviously, we're not doing something right in the industry as a whole. And that's kind of why we're here to talk about this, for safety reasons, for the increase of efficiency in some of these workflows. And then, I'd like to hand it off to Brenda so that she can kind of get into a little bit more about all of these new trends coming to life. So thank you again for joining us. And Brenda, I'll share it to you.
All right, thank you. So will you be advancing the slides on your side?
Garrett will.
There, okay. All right. So let's start off here with the 811 emergency study report that came out. In addition to the 30 billion that Marvin was talking about, there was also through this study, they found 61 billion that was lost to waste and inefficiencies in the system. And that's an issue that we're going to be addressing here, I think, with what we're talking about today. We can eliminate a lot of those inefficiencies with technologies. So I have on the right-hand side here, the journey towards tomorrow, which has been my goal for many, many years, is to try to bring the industry into the real world. I stole this from somebody else, from another company, which I won't mention, but they'll know who it is. They made the comment and said, we put a man on the moon, but we don't know where our utilities are on the earth. And it seems kind of funny that we kind of get that a little backwards, in my opinion, but that's probably because I'm in the industry and I'm, very involved in this and really care about the folks in this industry. But there's a comment here under fact number 1. It says all construction projects cost roughly 14% more than they should because of unmitigated risk on the contractor side. And then fact 2, step 2 there, it says the emergency study, again, we talked about here, 61 billion that was lost to inefficiencies in that system. So let's look at this now at this point from the contractor's perspective. And to me, being the leader of their association and, having a board of directors that I had to, work with and they're all working together to guide us into the future, we had to look for a solution. Our first solution was subsurface utility engineering. When to gather all of that information, then we need to go into the digital data collection and the digital mapping. And we started pushing towards that. And then from all of that, we get improved designs. Plans will be better designed. We'll have known utility locations that will all save money. And then we get to the construction phase where we'll have enhanced safety, which is really important for the guys that work out there in the field and the public. We'll have cost savings and improved efficiencies that lead to faster completion of projects and better client satisfaction. So what's the future? Is that the whole entire U.S. underground infrastructure is mapped out for future construction projects, for safety, and for asset management. So those are really our pathway that we need to start heading toward. So let's talk about you can flip to the next slide for me. Yeah, one of the things that was recommended in that 811 emergency study was the GIS system adoption by asset owners, all right, which is what I said we were talking about. We've collected the SU data. Now we have to have that GIS mapping. Next slide. So they wanted to look for in that study how they drive out waste, inefficiencies, and excess costs from the damage prevention and the utility locate process, and at the same time improve that public safety and lower the total cost to the ratepayers. Have asset management and operators, basically like the utilities and Department of Transportation and municipalities all involved in this. Next slide. So as you saw earlier, the Common Ground Alliance estimated 30 billion. In addition was the 61 billion that was estimated in the loss inefficiencies. Okay, next slide. And then there's perhaps 40 billion of the 61 billion that they believed in the study that could be driven out, and state-specific reports offer a clear line of sight regarding how and what cost and to what end each state can undertake various processes to improve that. In my opinion, the GIS mapping is going to be the #1 dollar driver in all of the options, because what the data mapping will do is it will advance all of the other things that they had mentioned. It's pretty clear. All right, next slide. So I wanted to share this one. This is the 2023 Pennsylvania Public Utility Commission violations by violations. So of interesting, in the Common Ground Alliance, we're always told that the excavator is the largest violator of the one call laws. And since 2019 in Pennsylvania, we've had mandatory reporting. Well, it started in 2018, but the first report came out in 2019. We've had mandatory reporting of violations by all stakeholders, which I don't know if any other state does that, but I think that's the best way that you can change your law to get the numbers that you really need to see, and how can you improve it knowing these factors. So as you can see there, section 2, the blue section, is the facility owners are the largest violators of the act, and excavators come in second with a 29%. So 61% facility owners, 29% excavators. And because we have SU language in the Pennsylvania law, we just now recently started enforcing that. So we now have designers and project owners who are being violated, mostly for designers for SU violations, and the project owners for SU violations and failing to get out there and mark their water and sewer, infrastructure that's under their purview in a timely manner. So that's some numbers that we don't typically see from the Common Ground Alliance, which is basically a locator reporting system. Very few contractors or excavators, whatever you want to call us, report to the damage prevention, just because they just not going to take the time to fill out one more report. and that's just the honest truth. Their job is to put pipe in the ground and not fill out reports. That's their attitude. Unfortunate, but true. Next slide. Well, that's Steve. So you can go back and you can stay on that slide if you want to. So here's an interesting thing. I looked at it over the years of what have the contractors done over those 26 years that I have worked for them. And, every 10 years in Pennsylvania, our one call law changes. So they've done things over the years. They've done risk assessments. They go out and they can conduct thorough risk assessments before they commence any underground utility construction, you know, to reduce damages. They try to comply with the regulations that are out there. Might involve their permits and approvals that they have to get to minimize risk and damages. They've done a lot of employee training. That was one of the biggest things that I was always organizing training for, was the one call law. And so they've tried to get their crews to understand how important that safety is in the field. They used advanced technologies. I'll kind of tell you a funny story there. They try to use they've actually gone out and started buying locators. That was the first thing they did, and started locating on their own. And then after they did that, I had an associate member who was the first in Pennsylvania to buy a vac truck. And I took him around to all the district meetings, and I have to, you guys are gonna kick out of this because it was like, no, I'm not gonna, it's too expensive. I'm not gonna do that. And blah. Well, today they almost all either hire a vac truck company or they have a vac truck themselves. So you can see how technology, it takes them a while, but they do start to change. There's another one out there that's it's called Rod Radar, has a LiDAR in its bucket, and I showcased to them during the pandemic in 2020 through a Zoom meeting. And a couple of them were like, yeah, that's great, but can I put it on my existing bucket because I don't want to buy a new bucket? Well, that's changing in their mindset too. It's another tool in their toolbox. They're always looking for more to help reduce damages. Effective communication is really important, that they try to improve their communication and open that line of communication between their employees, the management people, the facility owners, and so forth. They have implemented best practices. They followed the best practices. We had a member from Pennsylvania in particular, and Nuka National had some folks also on the CGA board to improve those best practices. And they've come back and they've tried to use those best practices in their business. They also have developed emergency response plans. We did that as an association. We worked together to come up with a comprehensive emergency response plan. What should you do? You know, promptly, what are your immediate corrective steps that you should take? You know, never leave the site, stay safe, you know, evacuate when you need to, those types of things. So that it was a checklist that they knew to boom, 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 go down and do this. We also did regular site inspections where, you know, when I first started in 1996, I think they're only the big contractors had a safety director. Today, that's completely changed. There's almost every one of them has a safety director, either a full-time safety director or a part-time safety director, or they have a specific person who is assigned throughout their on each job site to be their safety director for that job site, always looking to be proactive in helping them to address issues as the project escalates, you know, and moves along, watching for those hazards. They've done some collaboration as well with utility owners. We try to do pre-construction meetings as often as we can. Unfortunately, a lot of the stakeholders do not attend, even though we've tried to improve that. We wrote it into the law that it's mandatory. They still do not attend. That does not help us with our communication, and we need to improve on that. And then finally, for what they've done to try to mitigate is contractors have maintained detailed documentation. You know, they have the daily logs. If they encounter something with the existing utilities, they document it. A lot of them have software now. It's a little app on their phone, and it records everything, and they take their photos. You know, they basically talk into the phone, and it does the typing for them, so they don't even have to type. So technology is coming to their world, and that was one of the things that had come about. I'm thinking maybe that would have been in 2020 that first started. So those are the things that contractors have done over the years to try to improve it. Because what a lot of you probably don't know, if unless you're a contractor, you probably don't know that contractors have more responsibilities under the one call law compared to any of the other stakeholders. It's like 5 times the amount of responsibilities that as to what a facility owner might have, or to what a project owner might have, or a designer has. They have the most responsibility. So when you see those numbers that are up on that screen, keep in mind the contractor had in Pennsylvania, he had to apply with like 20 some, I forget the exact number, 20 some various sections that he could be violated for, compared to the facility owner who might have, 5, 6. So that actually skews that number a little bit, in my opinion, too.
Certainly.
So, why are we here is because we have a long way to go. We're not there yet. So I kind of wrote down 10 issues that I think contractors are still experiencing, and where it is that I think this data mapping, the SU and data mapping, and the digital collection of the data can all come together. One of the things that contractors see, and I'm sure not just them, but I think locators also see this, is incomplete utility records. Used to be in the old days, the guy that used to work there for, 50 years, basically, he had it all up here in his head. And he knew exactly, where everything was, because he helped put it in the ground. But then he retired or he died, and all of a sudden, all of that information was gone. And a lot of it did not ever get mapped. So that was that's a real challenge that we still have. And the older states like Pennsylvania, we've been around for a while. We have a lot of years of catching up to do. So inaccurate mapping is a real issue. Then we also have, rapid urbanization. That's ongoing development of projects can result in frequent changes to utility layout. We had a PUC hearing where a site developer was back actually building some buildings, and in the meantime, while they were building the house, the gas company came in across the street and put the utility in. And when they were ready to go build the house, they jumped across the street to build the next house, right? And boom, they hit the gas line. Well, they didn't blow anything up, but they hit the gas line, and they're like, well, they didn't do a refresh of their one call. And so there you have it, something new went in, and no one, they just didn't, know that it was there. They thought they were the only people on the job site. So you have those types of issues too. Again, you have that poor communication between those stakeholders. So there's lack of collaboration and information exchange that can result in outdated or insufficient data being provided to the construction team. That is really key to get that information out there. Here in Pennsylvania, our law requires mandatory attendance at those pre-construction meetings. As I said before, a lot of stakeholders still do not attend those communication meetings. We've got to try to find a way to improve that. Again, I think mapping can do that because everybody's pretty much willing to sit down and look at their computer. Number 4 that I have is there's a lack of standardization in utility markings. See this all the time with the PUC hearings. And when I've been on job sites, it's like this locator marks it this way, locator marks it this way. And that is different even across the nation, not just here in Pennsylvania, but from, locate company to locate company, things are different, even though there's a best practices out there in Common Ground Alliance in the CGA best practice manual. It has standards, but they are still not followed. I think that could be significantly improved with the mapping. Because I think they'll be able to look at the map and find what it is they need and won't have to so much rely on that marking. We have subsurface conditions and interference, as you know, soil composition and interference from other utilities. can affect the accuracy of markings. The unit that they're using might read one and there's a second pipe there or whatever. So that contractor's always facing challenges in accuracy detecting and marking of utilities when they're dealing with complex underground environments. Someone posted on LinkedIn the other day a photo of the pipes that are they were exposed in New York City on a street block, and I know Jim Ansbach with ASCE has an old one, but this was a newer photo, and I honestly do not know how they could put another utility in the ground there, but it is fascinating that the contractors are getting more and more utilities in that same right of way, and we have to get smarter about how we do it. And again, I think that mapping is the way to do that. We're still using some outdated locating technologies, I'll call it. So some utility marking technologies may have become outdated, or it's reducing the accuracy. And I think locators, they're using what they're given, by their company, but they're relying on some obsolete, less advanced equipment. I think we have much better equipment that we could start using to give more precise locating. Again, I do believe that mapping will do that.
Is that number 6? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I'm writing these down so I can share with the group.
Okay. Then number 7, inadequate training and education is another issue. Insufficient training of locators involved in utility marking can some new locate training that's available. I think Planet Underground, Staking University is doing some. I just saw one, there's one coming out in the California area that locators can go to. If there's locators who are on this listening today, I really highly recommend that you get a chance to go out to one of those trainings and get some additional education and call yourself certified. It will help. So lack of awareness sometimes about the importance of that precise utility marking. It's really, really important. I worked on a case and the utility was said it was all clear. And when the excavator went out there to work, it wasn't. There was a line that the marking that was originally put down, like, I don't know, 15, 20 days prior, had faded. The grass had been mowed. There was no marking there. Those kind of errors lead to accidents, and the poor man was injured. And that could have been avoided. It could have been avoided. And I think mapping again will help that. I think the excavator will be able to look to that map and he'll say, oh, that might not be marked here, but hey, there's something here on this map. That I think will be really great. We also have budget constraints issues. Everybody's always worried about the dollar and how far can we make that dollar go. So tight budgets sometimes may limit the resources that are available for advanced utility detection technologies and comprehensive surveys. So sometimes contractors are forced to prioritize cost-saving measures, potentially compromising the accuracy of utility markings that, they might even do with their locators out there trying to find something. Locators, that's also true of locators who might be forced to prioritize for cost-saving measures. Budget constraints is always an issue. And, the next one is time constraints. Construction projects, and I'm still trying to figure this one out. I have asked so many designers out there, why in the world do you put such a tight schedule on such a big project? But construction projects often operate under tight schedules, leaving limited time, for there to be thorough utility surveys and markings done. From the design and planning stage all the way through to the construction phase. The whole time constraint is very, very short for the types of projects that are built. and everybody's rushing to meet deadlines. And sometimes contractors and designers can overlook some critical steps in the process. I was on a job site once in the Altoona region here in Pennsylvania, which is center Pennsylvania, and the sewer line went right through the middle of his living room where his favorite chair sat, and we were like, what? How could this be? It's because of the critical timing. So those things are affecting all of us. And last for this is inadequate penalties through downtime or enforcement for mismarking of lines. So here in Pennsylvania, contractors, well, there's a Supreme Court law, and in a lot of states, there's the economic loss doctrine that will prevent a contractor from charging downtime to a facility owner. I believe, and I always have believed, that charging for downtime is probably the best enforcement tool any of us could have, because the excavator is certainly going to charge, and that facility owner is going to say, well, I can't keep paying downtime. I'm going to really make sure my locator is doing a really good job. But since I can't get that in Pennsylvania, my next best option, and still probably the best option, even still, is I push for subsurface utility engineering and now for mapping. So I think that that's going to be even better than downtime, but that's my opinion. Contractors might not agree with me, but again, my opinion. And enforcement for mismarkings, really, we need to do a better job on that. Utility owners, service providers may not face sufficient consequences for providing inaccurate information, and that reduces the incentive for accurate utility markings. Now, as you can see here in Pennsylvania, with 61%, they are being penalized here in Pennsylvania, but there's a lot of states across the United States that are not being penalized in this area, and it is not helping that contractor who's out there in the field. It's not really protecting the safety of the crew, and it certainly is not improving the safety of the public. And that's my high horse, I'll call it. Because I don't know if you guys know, but I have horses, and I like the taller the horse, the better. So I always shoot for the high horse. But I know that was a lot to grasp at one time, but that is basically, in a nutshell, the things that I have learned over my 26 years of working for the underground utility construction industry. And I'm anxious today to hear the technology side that Steve is going to share with us, and hopefully the Point Man folks that can help all of us to improve those last 10 items that I talked about.
So, Brenda, first off, thank you for all that. For anyone still listening in, if you have any questions, towards the end of the webinar, we're actually going to do a Q&A. So feel free to add into the chat any questions that may come up throughout the presentations, and we'll try to do our best to address those at the end of the presentations. But also, Brenda, just to be sure that I got this right. So out of the top 10 things here are your incomplete utility records, rapid urbanization, poor communication and information exchange, lack of utility data standardization across regions, subsurface conditions and interferences, outdated utility workflows and technologies, inadequate training for field workers, budget constraints, limiting resources, time constraints, which means efficiency and safety can be compromised, and lack of enforcement penalties available. So
Correct. Yeah, that
having all
is
that
it.
here, I'm actually just going to drop that in the chat in case anybody wanted to save those bullet points. But Brenda, thank you so much for that.
Yep.
I think now we're going to hand it over to Steve so that he can start his presentation for today.
Steve, I stopped sharing so you can share your screen now.
Yeah, I'll do that. Thank you. Yeah, that's a tough act to follow, and I have to say it's great to hear all the expertise and experience from somebody that's been involved in industry for a long, long time. So Perfect. All right, so I'm going to share a little presentation here. So essentially, I started this out about in earnest a little over 2 years ago. And the genesis of this was a conversation with J.D. Maniscalco at Colorado 811 around a white paper that Jim Onspach wrote regarding a Sharp 2 initiative to try and induce the state transportation departments to become the custodians of centerline information for assets, third-party assets in their rights of way. And JD said, my members will never agree to that. It's their data. They don't want to share it without knowing who's getting it and why. And they certainly don't want a separate database. So I started thinking about that issue, but the need to share that information. So to Barb's, to Brenda's points, the records are incomplete. They need to be shared. They need to have standards. There's all kinds of things that need to happen. So we looked at the current one call process and said, how can we make this better? And in the course of that, I came across the NUAR project in the UK, which is a national underground asset register. And they're creating a separate database, which wouldn't fly here in North America. But I thought, well, the basic nuts and bolts are there. So why can't I sort of leverage their approach, but then put a North American context to it and address the North American concerns around data access? And the fact that we're using a one call center that they don't really use in the UK. So, so I reached out to Jeff Zeiss, who was with, he put together a blog called Between the Poles. Jeff actually had a PhD in geomatics. They're very well recognized worldwide and involved in many projects worldwide around damage prevention, including NUAR, and did a lot of studies for CLIP. And one of the customers that he had, one of his clients, was Minnesota One Call. And he put me onto them early on. And I reached out to Barb Cedarberg and Bob Vasquez at Minnesota One Call. And they had a very similar initiative. So they are a one call center that is developing software to allow them to share data with between their members and locators and designers. So I reached out to them, and so in discussion with them, we decided, the two groups decided we should make this a North American initiative. So it's just like the one call process, it should be consistent across North America. So we decided to work together. So that's what this is all about. So it started off as Canadian initiative, and as soon as the US folks got involved, they said, well, it doesn't apply anymore. Let's make it a North American initiative. So we changed the name to Subsurface Utility Map Data Exchange. So it's just really is what it's all about. It's exchanging data around subsurface utilities. So SUMDEx is a free-to-use solution created by a group of damage prevention stakeholders that are contributing their time and expertise to help improve the effectiveness of the current one call process. So the data exchange is powered by Fusion View, which is the software that Minnesota 811 is developing, and they're going to make it available for free to all North American facility notification centers, or anyone else for that matter that wants to host a data set. So it might be the one call center might, or the utility companies might want to host a data set, especially around abandonments, for example. So that's one of the concerns that we have is who's the owner of a particular asset if it's abandoned. And right now there really isn't an ownership or a good database for some of that stuff. So this was something that we want to address as part of this SUMDEx initiative as well. So what's the problem? Well, the subsurface and underground infrastructure delivers essential services that fuel the North American economy and need to change this. Excavators damage the infrastructure because it's hidden from view and their precise location is unknown. And a lot of times, as we know, it's because they didn't put in a ticket. But even when they do put in a ticket, quite often the information provided is not accurate. So damage events harm people to disrupt services and product delivery, and the resulting costs each year that negatively impact our economy. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. So to prevent damage to underground infrastructure, and secure access to the precise location of the infrastructure. This needs to be made available so designers, locate service providers, and excavators can ensure that safety, efficiency, and asset integrity needs are met. So we heard a little bit about the cost identified in the US. I've kind of reiterated it here. But even in Canada, according to the Canadian Common Ground Alliance in 2020, the cost of reported underground infrastructure damage events was 1 billion Canadian dollars. And that's a low, I think, reflection of the actual cost. They claimed $200 million in direct damage costs, and then $800 million in societal costs. So that's a 4-to-1 ratio. In the UK, they came up with 15-to-1. So for every $100,000, let's say, in damage costs, it was $1.5 million in societal costs. And the University of Northumberland, sorry, not the Northumberland, anyway, there's another university in the UK that estimated those societal costs at 29-to-1. Now in the US, I talked to a person the other day with the DIRT reports, that did the reports for the Common Ground Alliance in the US. And he figured that $30 billion is probably like a 10-to-1. So what, 3 billion in direct damage, and the rest would be societal costs, the 31 billion or 30 billion. So Brenda mentioned 61 million. I don't have that. Even I hadn't even realized that there was even more cost associated with this that wasn't identified. So it's an enormous cost and a huge impact to the economy. So it's not just the safety and the impact on people and the environment. There's also this huge societal cost. So it's kind of a hidden tax, if you will. So what's the issue? Underground infrastructure is damaged because its location is not requested. It's a big problem. It's not known. It's not available. It's not viewable, not shared, or it's not accurate. And one of the big things that CGA in their next practices report identified was two things. They need better locates, and they need to develop a better access to, or a database, or essentially getting access to the data. So that's what we've tried to resolve with the SUMDEx initiative here. So to address the concern from the asset owners, we're providing the information that is sent by the owner to the authorized requester. And it's sent from the system of records. It's not a separate database. Nobody has access to the database directly. It's only a push from the asset owner to the requester. So it should be readily available, which means it should be real time. It should be secure. It should be limited to an area of interest, easily viewed, easily shared, complete, accurate, easily understood, and allows the requesters to send field verified information back to the infrastructure owner. So it'd be nice to have that feedback system to say, you sent me a record, but here's where we actually found it in the field. It was out by 6 feet or 12 feet or whatever it was. And let the asset owner know that, hey, there's a discrepancy that we found in the field. And then they can investigate and update the records. All right. So how do we do this? We're creating a data exchange system that utilizes the current one-call process, the current one-call organizations. So we have a bunch of folks out there in the one-call centers that can already staff and provide the support for the exchange. We can use provincial and state cadastral maps as base maps, and in a lot of cases, that's already being done in the one-call centers. They have the cadastral parcel maps, if you will. Allow the utility owners to push the data to the requester via a portal. And the information that's the request comes through a ticket, a one-call ticket. So the information requested is confined to the extent of the one-call ticket boundary. And we're only going to provide the data to registered users, so designers, first responders, and locate service providers. We display the underground infrastructure information temporarily. So once that ticket expires, then access to that information will also expire. If they need to request it a second time, they would get an update. So they make a second call, if you will, get the ticket updated, and that information from the utility owner would be refreshed and sent out anew. The intent is to support the use of CSA S25020 or 20 in Canada, ASE 3822, which is mapping of existing utility infrastructure, and ASE 7522, which is the as-built standard. So we'll support that and support the latest software interfaces and mapping tools. So it doesn't matter whether you use a GPR or electronic locate tool or whatever, then the intent is to pull data information or pull the data in from whatever systems are out there that's in use. So we want to be somewhat agnostic to the data collection aspect of it. And the other side of this is we want to automate the process wherever possible. So an example, here in British Columbia, the city of Burnaby has automated the ticket response system. So when somebody sends a request for a design ticket, within 3 minutes, that design ticket is responded to, even in the middle of the night. So 365 days a year, pretty much with 99.99% uptime, somebody puts in a ticket, and within 3 minutes, they get the data that's requested electronically. So it's a shapefile or KML or GDB or whatever format they've wanted in, even CAD files. So they've automated it. They save, it costs them about $5,000 a year to operate this thing. It used to cost them $150,000, and the system's even growing larger from that. So the automation is just doing nothing but saving them money. So it used to take them 2 or 3 days to put together for a large design ticket, let's say for a highways widening project. They could pull those files in and provide them to the transportation department within 3 minutes. So that's what the automation can do. So the opportunity, improve everyone's safety, increase the accuracy of underground infrastructure records, and we do this by providing that feedback mechanism from the field back to the utility owner. Improve productivity, reduce cost, reduce project timelines by improving workflows, and this is both on the ticket response system, but also on items that are found in the field that could be used to update the information so that designers can reflect field findings immediately. They don't have to wait for a paper process to go back in and receive information from the field so they can update their design. So we want to provide a simple and secure method to view asset locations, reduce the effort and cost to provide reporting. And this could be, progress or just the capture of data in the field to say, how much we've done and how many potholes we've done, this sort of thing. Provide simple audit capabilities to ensure compliance. And to give you an example for this, CDOT on one of their projects had a requirement to daylight assets every 50 feet for certain assets, and they could view that in the system and see whether that pothole had actually been done or not. And they could ensure that the data collection was compliant to the requirements. And the big one is to reduce societal costs, including human costs, economic costs, that sort of thing. All right, associated with damage events. So I just pulled this from the NEWAR project. So they did a pretty good job here, identifying some of their use cases and value. So they had safe digging, which is utility strike avoidance. So they wanted to identify everything that was in a location so that they could dig safely. Line of sight efficiencies. So again, it's a single integrated view of all the assets so they could get a good understanding, situational awareness of, if you will, in real time out in the field. And Brenda touched on this a bit when she said that, somebody had installed a gas line to the house next door, and within a couple of days, they'd struck it. Now, if you have real-time data feed, then it wouldn't matter that they hadn't done that locator, or they didn't submit that data. If they had access to the data because it was submitted in real time, they would have known that there was a line there and it was not marked yet.
We hear that all the time, Steve, from clients working with Pointman, for example, that some of the problems that they're trying to solve are just this, what you're talking about right now.
Perfect, yeah. Yeah, site planning and project efficiency. This is about the fact that a lot of times, especially something as large as a DOT project or a major construction project, they'll do very detailed design before they go to bid. And then they go out there and they start doing their field work, is essentially the pre-construction site investigation work. And then they realize that, hey, what we thought was there isn't actually there. It's over here, and it's in our way now. There's all these conflicts and clashes, they call them. So the intent here is to gather that information early, make it available to bidders early and designers, so they understand, what's supposed to be there and what's actually there prior to start of construction. Right. So that's the whole thing around accurate and comprehensive plans. In the data exchange, if it's electronic, if it's shared through a central platform, it's all real time or near real time, like within minutes. Okay. So that's what the UK newer folks had identified. So for asset owners, the accuracy of asset records will be improved. This is for that data feedback mechanism. The ability to automate the one-call ticket processes and responses will reduce their costs. Improved utility clash detection and redesign costs and schedule reductions. Construction bid costs will be reduced due to lower risk of line strikes. And CDOT on the C70 project figured that they saved about $2 million right up front because they made an information available to the bidders. So they saw roughly a $2 million savings right there. And the lower incidence of line strikes will help improve their corporate health and safety environmental performance. So their HSE metrics will improve. That's just the asset owners. So the service providers, facility notification centers will see improved service offering effectiveness. So they'll see their metrics going down as well. So fewer damage events, which is really what they're all about. SUE firms will see an increased demand for their services. And this is a really big thing now. People are slowly getting it that SUE work pays for itself several times over, 4 to 7 to 10 times over. Locate service providers will also see an increased demand for their services. Once people start to understand that better maps reduce their costs all the way around, they're going to ask these LSPs to go out and say, let's say I've done a locate in one area and I found a discrepancy. They may request that locate service provider to go out and extend that locate, if you will, extend the data capture to cover a couple of city blocks where there's maybe the records aren't that accurate until they can tie it into good records. So there's an opportunity there for LSPs to add work to their as if they need it at times, but it could be done in the off season kind of thing as well, right? So that's the whole thing. LSPs be adding value to the locate process by capturing that location data and submitting it to the utility owner. Engineering design firms will see cost and schedule reductions. So CDOT, on their project, the C70 project, they related to us that it would take sometimes a week to turn design around. So when they found a discrepancy in the field and they had to reflect that change in their design, it would take a week to get the information turned around. They had it down because it was electronic. They had it down to less than 48 hours, and they were hoping to get that reduced to 24 hours. They'd have a 24-hour turnaround from the discovery of the field discrepancy to actual revised design. Construction companies see improved safety, cost, and schedule performance. And there's another thing on the C70 project. Colorado DOT manually gathered the data for the centerline information from the utility companies that had assets in the rights of way. for this 13-mile project. They conflated that manually. So they put it onto a common base map. So it's the same geoid, same datum, same scale. It made that available to the bidders. Right? Now, when they went out, they did the SU work first and they confirmed all that data. And then they made that that information available to the successful contractor. So what happened was, and the contractor, by the way, did another project just a few years prior with the same excavation crew superintendent and same excavation crews pretty much. And they reduced their number of damage events by over 95%. So they had on a previous job, they had about 330 strikes on subsurface utilities. And it was, I think it was a 10-mile job. This project was the same density of infrastructure per mile. They had less than 30 line strikes. And most of those were fiber lines that were not reported to the one call center. So apparently fiber companies like to hold their data close to their chest, and they didn't report that they'd had assets in that area to the one call center yet. So nobody knew they even had stuff there. So there was no map to work from and no way to locate the fiber, which is something else we need to get cleaned up as well. So they went from 300 odd line strikes on the previous job to less than 30. So they reduced their line strikes by well over 90%, which means that they saved about 6 months on their schedule. They saved about $3.8 million in costs, direct costs. That's the contractor. So in the previous job, they saw close to $4 million in damage. And on the C70 project, they said it was just around $100,000 in damage. So huge savings. Other stakeholders, what benefits do they see? Safety's improved. Public will see reduced negative environmental and economic impacts. So delays, for instance, traffic delays of a project that's 6 months shorter because there's no damage or no delays caused by damage events. The project's finished up quicker and then the highways at full capacity. Whereas before they might have had 1 or 2 lanes blocked off 24/7. You never know, right? So the other thing is that there's lots of opportunity for colleges and universities to expand their engineering and geomatics programs to support what we're up to here. And the regulators will see improved compliance and auditability. So, the Common Ground Alliance said that in the last 5 years, the damage incidents are actually going up. And they haven't reduced, there hasn't been a significant reduction in the incident line strikes in the last decade. So there really hasn't been any change other than the click before you dig. It did have an impact and it's still having an impact where it actually improved the information made available to the one call center to put the ticket together. So that's been a major improvement. The fact that they have electronic tickets, so it's easier to request a ticket and it's a much more accurate ticket. Now, the other thing is that utility owners provide records showing the location of buried infrastructure to sue firms, surveyors, and locate service providers. The billions of dollars spent on sue work and utility locates each year can provide field verified asset location data back to the utility owners so they can ensure that their records are accurate. Now, if my records are accurate, I don't need a 50-foot or 150-foot buffer zone around my assets. So I'll get fewer notifications from the one call center if I can reduce my buffer zones, and I won't have to send my locate crews out quite as often. So every truck roll costs the utility company money, so they can reduce the number of truck rolls. And every time they do a truck roll, if they get good data back from the field, then they can start to really improve their damage prevention capabilities. So as I mentioned before, the benefit to cost ratio of providing electronic maps from the utility owner is estimated by the newer team as a minimum of 15-1. And actually have, if you want to capture this, we might get this actually in the chat. The newer benefits paper outlines quite strongly and quite accurately to quite a level of detail of the benefits that they saw. So our initiative has the potential to save lives, reduce construction costs, reduce direct damage costs, and consequential societal costs, especially in terms of safety to people working on or near these facilities, the environment, and the economic impacts that it has as well. So it is an initiative worthy of support by all of the stakeholder communities. And that's it for me. I'm pretty much done here. And if anybody wants more information, I've got a brochure that we can make available to all the attendees today. And I'm sure Marvin and crew will get that off to you, or give me a list of people that I can send it off to.
Well, certainly. Thank you, Steve, for giving us that presentation. There's always so much that we can learn from presentations just like this. I think there was a single question that came through. I think this might be directed to you, Steve. Does the system that you're working with retain the quality levels utilized during the suit process so that the contractor knows how reliable the design information is for the utility location bidding purposes?
Yes and no. And here's the thing. You can collect stuff to an accuracy level, let's say, but it may not meet the standard because according to the standard, it has to be signed off by an engineer or a professional surveyor, for example. And that data to meet ASCE, for instance, is intended for the project itself that you're working on, and it's for the project owner only. However, that being said, you could send that data up to the utility owner. You just can't call it quality level A or quality level B or whatever.
Right.
But you still can't put in the record the accuracy of 20 centimeters or 3 centimeters or whatever it is. You can still have that as part of the record that's submitted to the utility owner, but not the project owner. The project owner gets the ASCE certification, if you will, but the utility owner just gets the data.
That's where we describe Pointman. There's a lot of ways that you can use the software like ours and others to be able to give verifiable information to the stakeholders. However, this is just a tool. Our tool, just like others, they're just tools to be able to present that information. It's still up to the certified professional who can give their stamp of approval to be able to give these designations on the data. And it's up to how robust that data is on what type of designation they're going to give that.
Yeah, they can see how accurate the data is. They just can't call it quality level A unless that engineer is willing to sign off on it.
That's right. That's right. Well, it doesn't look like we have any other questions that have come through. To everyone on the call who's joined us to the end here, we thank you very much for joining us on our webinar. We will be following up with an email on some of those links that Steve had shown and some of the other information that was presented today. Keep an eye out for more Pointman webinars. We'll be publishing one for probably the next upcoming 4 to 6 weeks. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to any of us here at the ProStar team. Brenda, Steve, thank you so much for joining us today, and everybody else who was on the call. We appreciate all of our listeners, and we will be back in the upcoming weeks with another Pointman webinar. So thank you, everyone, and hope you have a great rest of your week.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Take care now.